Welcome, everyone. GDG Cloud Boston and GDG Atlanta are pleased to present the Professional Cloud Database Engineer Certification Workshops. This is a meeting in a series of 12 meetings that we're holding over the summer. This is called Informal Session number 2. Google has supplied materials for 6 sessions that we call formal sessions, and we are providing our own material in between, and we call these informal sessions so that people have a little more time to complete the labs. And the 6-week program is a little hard to for some people to finish just because of other commitments and so forth. So welcome to everybody. Our hosts are Norbert Kremer speaking. I'm at GDG Cloud Boston. My co-host is Jessica Rudd at GDG Atlanta. I think Jessica may not be on this evening. I think she has other commitments tonight. So if she might jump in at some point, that would be wonderful. But what that means is I may not be following the chat as closely as Jessica usually does. So if anyone has something urgent, I'll get to it eventually, but may not see it right away. As all of our GDG events are covered by Code of Conduct, this one is as well. And the spirit of the Code of Conduct is very simple. It's be nice, respectful, collaborative, and participate to your ability and willingness. And the formal definition of that is here on a link. You can check out the legalese version of it, but it's pretty basic. We generally don't have any issues with this, so it's fine. Tonight we're going to have not as long a session as last week. I'll give you a hint. We're going to have a review of last week, what happened at our meeting last week, and then also intervening what happened in between this week. And I'm checking I have another computer here where I can follow the Slack channel in case anything's come up over there. Yeah, okay. So we'll review last week. We'll look at our overall plan for the whole summer. And this evening I've added my own content 3 and 4, which are, I want to discuss the data-related job roles, which I think is interesting. And we really want to set this up for a more extended conversation that we have later. And I want to get people's feedback on what parts of this they would be interested in learning more about. So that won't be a very long presentation, but it will be in the spirit of the Shuha material that I covered a couple weeks ago. We'll then have a preview of the Google Cloud database options. There are quite a few database options within Google Cloud. There are some other types of databases that have important use cases that are not provided as a Google managed service, and it's good to just be aware that these exist. They won't be covered on the exam, of course, but they will add to your knowledge as a database engineer, and certainly good to know about all the various options that are out there. And these could always be run in Google Cloud as a self-managed service. Right? You can just create a VM with GCE, install whatever software you want, and possibly run that as either as run it on VMs, as we've seen, and possibly with auto scaling. And likewise, you could probably run most of them in a Kubernetes cluster. Many things are available these days as containerized options. So just as we saw before, you have 3 options of running on a VM, running in Kubernetes as a containerized application, or running as a managed service in Google Cloud in some cases. So we'll discuss all these things in some depth. We won't go very deep this evening. Again, I just want to set things up for the following weeks, and then part 5 we'll have our Ask Us Anything session, where we can take questions about labs or skills boost or anything else, and then we'll orient everyone for what's happening next week and later. Okay, with that, let's get started. Review of last week. So I hope that everyone feels that these sessions are valuable. I've had a lot of positive feedback on Slack and LinkedIn and elsewhere, so I think for most people it's going relatively well. That said, I talked with Jessica after last week's meeting. We ran long last week, and I think that is something we don't want to do very often. Was an unusual situation last week. The course 3 is a bit of a monster. The enterprise database migration course is difficult. There's a lot of video content and a lot of difficult labs. And also last week, Google provided a lot of slide content for that session. So I think what I discussed with Jess is that we went down the rabbit hole on some topics at the beginning of the meeting that may not have been of interest to the whole audience, to the entire audience. So I think what we're going to do from now on is we're going to restructure the meetings a little bit. Is someone trying to speak, or it's just a background? Okay, I think everyone's muted now. Great. So as I pointed out lower down, we're going to restructure the meetings a little bit. We'll take a checkpoint at 7 p.m. just to see where we are, with the goal of getting done by, oops, I'm sorry. Stop my sharing here for a minute. Let's get back to that. So we'll have a checkpoint at 7 just to make sure that we can finish by 8. And then we'll have our lab discussion and Q&A sessions at the end so that people can drop off if they want to. They have other commitments, or they're just not that interested in the detailed discussion. They can drop off. Now, the other glitch that we had last week was the sample questions were obviously not related to our learning path. I discovered that about an hour before the meeting, and it was not enough time for me to recover gracefully. So we stepped through the questions that were part of the Google supplied materials. They were not the right ones for our learning path. I hope we got some benefit from understanding the approach of answering the questions, but we clearly need to get the right questions in the future sessions. And the ones I looked at for the remaining sessions do tie to this database learning path. I tried to find the questions that were in this slide material last week seemed to be related to security. I couldn't really find those questions in the security materials, and so I don't know. I'm not sure where they came from. It doesn't matter. We made the best of it, and we will have the correct ones in the future. We'll double check that earlier to make sure we got the right ones. We also will get the Slido working. We had a technical problem with Slido last week. I'm going to work with Jessica on that. Now, all that said, the future courses I think are a little bit, maybe not easier, but they're at least more straightforward. They don't have the monster Oracle bare metal solution lab in there, which some people struggled with valiantly and were able to complete it finally. So I think most of the other labs are a little more straightforward. So the videos from last week and this week will be posted by tomorrow. I had quite a lot of other obligations with holiday and other things going on that I was not able to get the videos posted as we try to within a couple of days. So we're going to work on that. I should be able to get them all these 2 weeks. I'll be able to get them posted by tomorrow. Again, Slack is the place to check for that. We always make our announcements and updates on Slack when we do something like that. I do have a little bit of news concerning the other path, the other data-related Google engineer path is called professional data engineer, right? So we talked about this a lot, so I won't go too deep, but there are 2 certifications. The one learning path we're on is called Cloud Database Engineer, and the other one is called Data Engineer. So there's no cloud and no data. There's no base at the other one, right? It's just Data Engineer. Now, there was a plan to Meredith Olson was going to run these data engineer certifications at GDG Cloud Bloomington Normal in the Midwest. She's going to do them starting in July. She's had to cancel that series. So we're a little bit of regrouping. I would like that material to be presented somewhere in North America this summer, this fall, before the end of the year. In other words, I don't know if we will be able to do that. There is a series running right now in Munich. It's almost toward the end of it though, so I think it's too late to join that one, and that really doesn't help too much, right? So we're going to work on that, and we'll have updates on that later. I noticed I wasn't able to join the Slack very much during the latter part of last week. I got on over the weekend. I saw people were collaborating and helping each other, which is the ideal situation. If people can do that, it's even better than having me do it. And I noticed that some of the hints that I'd given to some people were being passed on then to other people. So that's really very gratifying for us and as leaders, and we like to encourage that and see more of that. So let's keep moving here. Reviewing last week's meeting, I mentioned the so-called SRE books from Google, the site reliability engineering topic. I will go back into the video. I think I can probably find that spot in the video where I talked about that. I'll link it all back, but I just want to, for those who are interested, these are the SRE books from O'Reilly. These are kind of the classic ones that Google people wrote, and they're published by O'Reilly. So I was thinking there were two, the ones on the left and the middle. I knew about these two, and the third one has also been published, called Seeking SRE, which is more of just a conversational thing, but probably very interesting. I haven't read the third one, and so that is out there for you. I'll link it back to last week's video when I get the chance to look at the transcript. And it's not directly related to too much to our database work, but if you're working in the cloud, it's always something that the cloud environment always puts interesting opportunities in front of you. Let's put it that way. Okay, where are we in our plan overall? Let's have a look at that. Again, the point of the whole series is to go from textbook knowledge to gives you a lot of hands-on experience with Skills Boost. This will help you help your expertise in your job role. It'll help you do your job better. It may help you attain a different job or more interesting job than the one you have now. So a lot of careers are built as stepping stones, and we do the basic fundamental things first, and as we get good at those and we learn them, we move on. And this is, in keeping with that whole Shuhari idea that I talked about a couple weeks ago. And so that's our overall goal here, is to help everyone, no matter what level they're at. So we take, we have suggested prerequisites for this learning path, but we also accept anyone who's interested, and we try to help everyone at every level move from wherever you are to move up to the next level. So that's our goal here overall. And again, the database engineer learning path itself, we try to give enough breadth so that you know how to choose the best technology for a given business problem, and then enough depth to use that chosen solution in the best possible way, including the most cost-efficient way. These days, cost is becoming quite important in every solution design as well. I won't go further because we've talked through these points before, but just those top two, the top line on each side, is really helpful to keep that in mind. Looking at our overall course plan, this week we're midway between our formal session number 2 and formal session number 3. So we will try to get through, I hope people have wrapped up their work on course 3, the enterprise database migration. Very difficult course, very challenging. Hopefully people have paused that or completed the amount that they want to do on that course 3. And I hope everyone's working on course 4 and course 5. As you see here on the right here, course 4 and actually every course after 3 has no video lessons at all, as the video lessons are done. So there's no more watching the recordings. It's just a lab, right? It's all labs all the way from here on out. And so it's all skills boost from now on. And these course 4 and 5 have 5 or 6 labs each. The first course 4 is on MySQL. Course 5 is all about Postgres. And these labs should be, you know, as I said, not necessarily easy, but at least they should be straightforward in the way that you can see the goal, and probably, you know, if you don't get it on the first try, definitely go back in and try it again. You'll probably get it on the second try. Just to look at this same idea in a different context, this is the overall plan that we've laid out for all the weeks. So we are, as I said, we're between, we're actually in week 4, which is because the informal sessions are not broken out on this spreadsheet. We're between 3 and 5. So we want to have completed the MySQL course and the Postgres course by next week. So if you're working on those, either one of those courses this week, that's fine, you're on track. And our supplemental material next week will be tied into relational databases, which are MySQL and Postgres. And then we'll, today I'm going to tee up the conversation about the NoSQL databases that come in the following weeks. So I'm just going to tee that up today. I won't go too deep today. So with that, let's go into that. Let's talk about this is a preview, right? I just said it's a preview of the Google Cloud Database options. And so how does this look? I really want to recommend for those who are interested in this area, there are 2 books that I found really helpful. They're not new. They're not at all new. They're both from 2012, but they are kind of the you know, the NoSQL data stores became prominent in the late 2000, between, you know, the late 2000 and up to, well, what do you call it? The late aughts, I guess, right? And around 2010, they were becoming very, very well used, and they had great, you know, use cases that were important, and people understood what these were for. And so there was actually a lot of confusion in the field among database practitioners, like, well, what are all these NoSQL options? How do they differ? When would I use which one, and so forth? And these 2 books came out in 2012, which are really helpful. The one on the left is from Martin Fowler and Pramod Sadalaj, really well-known, respected authors. Martin Fowler is another signer, I believe, of the Agile Manifesto. We talked a couple weeks ago about another book author who is also a signer of the Agile Manifesto. So I think whenever I see things that are written by these authors, I pay attention, because they're typically very smart and very well written also. And so this book is no exception. It's really good. It steps through a number of NoSQL data stores, and they introduce this idea called aggregate data model, and it really gives you a way of thinking abstractly about how do these databases work, how do they store my data, why is that possibly a good solution for the business problem that I'm trying to solve. And then they also take on the idea of scalability. How do you scale these up to internet scale? Which ones scale well, which ones have trouble scaling? And so that actually connects to this abstract idea of aggregate data model. So it's a very interesting read. It's where I've really learned to think clearly about, you know, which database would I use in which scenario, which business situation. And so it helped me learn how to think as a solution architect, in other words. The book on the right is very similar. I've not actually read the one on the right, but it is covers some of the same NoSQL database systems that are covered in the book on the left, but it does it in a more practical way. So it gives you like a step-by-step guide on how to get started with several popular database systems. This is not oriented to cloud. You know, it's 2012, right? So cloud wasn't really it's just being born, really, and the approach is to use open source packages, download this on your local system. I believe every database mentioned in the 7 databases book is available as an open source version, so you can download it, install it on your own personal computer, you know, try it out. You could probably do a lot of that in the cloud now as well, which might be even easier, right? You can, especially if it's a Linux-based instance, you can spin up a Linux VM in the cloud, install some software, work with it for a while. When you're done with it, or when you trash the environment, whichever way it works out, you can just turn it off and throw it away. And you could do this at minimal cost in the cloud. So either way is a good approach. Today, probably a lot of these are available as Docker, containerized images as Docker images. So you could run a lot of these experiments. You could run them in Docker containers on your PC or in the cloud, either way. And then once again, as soon as you're finished with the Dockerized version, you can just throw it away. And so that's a great way to experiment. So I recommend these books. At least take a look at them, read the reviews on Amazon, see if there's something that you might want to dig into. We'll cover this. We'll cover the highlights of these ideas certainly on our own, and the Skills Boost material will give you some insight into it. And there's certainly plenty on the web, on the internet web, and you can find certainly lots of writings on NoSQL data stores. And but these 2 books really stand out as very clearly written. They really encapsulate the ideas as they were in 2012, right? Okay, so the types that there are, you know, the relational ones that you're working with now, MySQL and Postgres primarily as open source examples of relational DBMS, database management system, really great systems. We'll talk about, so the NoSQL is an umbrella term that covers a lot of different technologies. It's actually not a great name in the sense that, you know, it defines something by what it isn't. And, you know, that's a little strange sometimes. And it does cover a number of different things that are really very different from each other. So it's an umbrella term. It's not the best, most descriptive word. And ironically, some of the so-called NoSQL databases now have SQL interfaces as well. So it's not, you know, it is what it is. It's a very catchy term. That's why it is caught, you know, once it got coined, it caught on very rapidly, and that's why it kind of stuck. But we'll go through the main varieties of what we mean by NoSQL data stores. It is important to know what they are because people will use the term and expect, you know, if you're a database expert, you just have to know what it means. And in the back of your head, you're thinking, okay, that could mean one of 3 or 4 things, but I know at least I can have this conversation now with whoever's mentioning this word. Okay, there are also graph databases. They would conceivably be called by some people NoSQL type databases as well. You know, another word for NoSQL would be just simply non-relational data store, right? You could just call it that way. That the real distinction is whether it's uses a relational data model or not, and it's not actually the SQL language that is the big differentiator. But that's the word that we have. GraphDB would fit in that category also of non-relational data store. It is very specialized type though, and we'll talk about that. There's also in-memory caches like Memstore and Redis. We'll talk about those. They could be grouped under NoSQL as well if you wanted to. Sort of depends how you divide, you know, draw the line. And then there's some others. And then some of these are available in Google as managed services, some are not. And some might be available in the Google Cloud Marketplace. right, as prepackaged images that are available from third-party solution vendors. And the advantage of using the Google Cloud Marketplace is that you would get something that's pre-built. You don't have to install it yourself on a VM. It's pre-built, it's ready to run. You probably get some support from that vendor. And then also it's going to run in Google Cloud, and you'll be billed in Google Cloud along with your other Google Cloud resources that you're using. And that is usually a more convenient way to be billed rather than starting a relationship, separate relationship with every vendor that's in the marketplace. So that we'll talk about some of this in more detail. I think that's all I'm going to say about this today, actually. Yeah, the next little intro topic for today is the data-related job roles. I came up with quite a few just in a few minutes of writing this slide. So we could think of, database administrator, data architect, or database designer. We could think of a database developer, which is a SQL expert, SQL developer, business intelligence developer or report writer, data engineer. Now this top four, I would say, fall squarely within our learning path, or maybe only just the top three actually are squarely within our so-called cloud database engineer learning path. When you start getting into BI developer, data engineer, and so forth, you're now going sort of in the territory of the data engineer. And when you get down to data analyst and data scientist, you're almost tending towards the machine learning and AI end of things. But all of these could be considered roles where you work with data a lot. And even enterprise architect has to be aware of what kind of data is being passed around, and will work closely with data architect or database designer. And so I would encourage you to provide feedback to me on Slack or on LinkedIn. Just let me know which of these you're interested in learning about. I put a note out on Slack a few weeks ago that one question I wanted to cover was in this realm of database developer or SQL developer. It's like, how much SQL do you actually need to know these days? I think it's a fair question. I think for data engineers, it's one answer that I have in mind. For cloud database engineers, you have to know a slightly different set of SQL. You have to be conversant with working with data in a little bit of a different way. And we can, that's one area. Number three is the one that I'll definitely provide some extended notes on that. And also number two, data architect, I want to discuss that a little bit as well. And I'll talk to this data architect idea in a moment on the next slide. And then database administrator is something that, a lot of companies don't want to have database administrators anymore. So it's a kind of an let's say, under-respected job. And in some ways, by moving to the cloud, you can eliminate some of the work that database administrators do because, for example, patching servers and keeping up with the latest version of Postgres, things like that, would be something that you could just have the cloud vendor do for you, right? And so there is less work when you move to the cloud. There can be less DBA, so-called DBA work. I would argue that you still need someone who has a DBA responsibility. It may not be a separate job role or a separately identified person, but someone needs to manage security, and someone needs to think about data governance. And whether that's in the cloud or on premises, that's just the way things are. And if you overlook those things, you're definitely going to set yourself up for problems. So let me go. I just want to give you a taste of the direction that I want to go with this. On the next slide is the data. This talks about data architecture, data architect. And so in today's world, we the decentralized approach is very much favored over centralized approaches. And so when I got into the business, which is let's say a long time ago, right? It was very common to have a data architect and enterprise architects, and there was a very heavy central control, especially in a financial institution or bank. There were standards that had to be followed. There was a certain way to write code. There was a code guide or style, coding style guides, things like that had to be followed. And most of that has gone away in the more modern approaches. And part of it is the movement from waterfall to agile methods, agile development methods. And in some ways, it's a good thing. But on the other hand, it's I'm a little surprised sometimes that in a large company and with large projects, which are, projects that span many years, 5 to 10 years of lifetime of an application or more, and pretty large projects that cost millions of dollars to build, and then several millions more to run over a few years, right? So we're talking about not small projects, and yet there's an idea that we used to be common in the 90s to use data modeling tools and have some person be recognized as a data architect, and that mostly has gone away. I just don't see companies for the most part buying data modeling tools and not investing much in data architecture. There are exceptions. I do get job inquiries for data architect roles, but they're much fewer than they used to be. And there are some reasons for that, is that there are just fewer custom databases are being built, right? There are a lot of applications that used to be built in-house have gone to shrink wrap, what we call COTS software, right? Commercial off-the-shelf software, or COTS. And so most companies don't build their own accounting system anymore. They would use software from Oracle or another vendor like that, SAP maybe. SAP is ERP, so-called ERP software. Salesforce is CRM software. So there are a lot of COTS software packages, and also now obviously software as a service, which is a cloud-based approach, much like Salesforce. So those have become very popular, have reduced the need for a lot of data modeling done in-house. Now, to my point of view, it's gone too far to the complete elimination of even the idea of the job role. And so there's one author that Gregor Hoppe that I followed for many years. He actually wrote a great book a long time ago called Enterprise Integration Patterns. It's not totally related to what we're doing here, so I didn't give you the book title as I did for others. But his writing was very influential on me and very helpful to me in certain projects I did quite a while ago. And he's now, I kind of lost touch with him. I hadn't followed him for a number of years, and I recently re-engaged with his writings on LinkedIn and elsewhere. And he's now calls himself strategist, engineer, author, and speaker, and he works at AWS now. This idea here is that, look, you have it, whether you recognize it or not, you have a data architecture, right? It's very common now for some shops that a developer will just get access to a database and start creating tables on the fly as needed. Okay, I need a place to store this, so I'll create a table for it. And that can work on small projects, but it doesn't scale well to larger projects. And what happens is you end up building a database by accretion of little incremental needs, and there's never really a plan to recognize an architecture as being something that's valuable. And so Hopi would say, and I agree, you're going to have an architecture whether you document it or recognize it or not, because people are either building it on the fly, or you can do a little more planning and do it that way. Now, the 4 approaches that he outlines here, I think this is a great diagram. I just like the way he's done that. So we used to have in the past, the one on the left, the so-called benevolent dictator, right? That was the central authority. You know, all decisions about data tables must come through this, you know, ivory tower person who's going to, you know, take 3 months or 6 months to make a decision. Then you will be told how to do it and when to do it, right? That sort of thing. That's pretty much gone away. That's not, it never was popular. It was always problematic in terms of the delays. Developers hated it, hated this approach. I think I see both sides of it. I see the value in some central governance, but I also think that the IT people who have those roles, they were the source of their own undoing, because they often were so slow and so unresponsive, and really created the impression that they didn't care very much about the small needs of individual developers, right? So that whole model has kind of gone away, and I think largely because management has wanted to eliminate the expense of it, but it's kind of left us with, well, where do you want your architect to sit? And the title of this, as you see it on the bottom here, would you like architects with your architecture? Now he's talking about cloud architecture or solution architecture in general, but it applies the same to data architecture. And so we don't want the pattern. We don't want the pattern on the left anymore. We also don't want to go all the way to the opposite side of, you know, to the far right, where the architecture is implicit and everybody can just create whatever table they want. That leads to chaos and eventually very poor data quality, leads to not knowing how to calculate very important things like revenue. How many widgets did we sell last month? You can't even answer these basic questions if your data architecture is a mess and your data quality is poor. These are really severe problems that a lot of companies face, but that's a result of this so-called implicit architecture approach on the right side. So let's just say that we have to have an architecture role, a data architect. Somebody has to do the data architect work. And these 2 middle diagrams represent what we call modern, self-governing, high-velocity agile teams. And I've had the pleasure of working on several such teams at the consulting project that I've done in the last 5 years. And it's really wonderful when you plug into a nice team. Everyone's cooperative, collaborative, and they just get it. You know, they just get what we're trying to do, trying to move forward. We're trying to go at high velocity. Occasionally we make mistakes and we have to refactor, go back, but it's all, you know, we do retrospective reviews. They're blameless. Things happen, mistakes happen, we fix them, we move forward. And it's really nice to be on a team like this. So that's what this is represented in the middle of these 2 approaches. So you can either have within the you know, within an agile team that I've described, you can have this approach on the right, which is more closer to the ideal of an agile team, is that in theory, you create a backlog of tickets and you pull tickets in to work on them, and every developer, every person on the team is able to pick up every ticket and work equally well on each individual story or ticket. And that usually doesn't happen. It's not easy or necessarily always desirable to have every person be very much equivalent to the other people. There's some advantage in being able to do lots of things on, you know, to be able to do all the things that you want to do on an agile team, but not every person is going to have the same skill set. So we usually end up with something like this number 2 scenario, where there is a primary data architect within the team. Every team does their own architecture. It usually is done by one person, but there might be several people that have sufficient skill to take care of that role when that person is out or unavailable or on vacation or something like that. So that's usually what we end up with is number 2. We definitely want to avoid the 2 extremes and go with either number 2 or 3. So this is in keeping very much with, we're getting a little bit out of the database engineering world here now when I talk about this, but in the data engineer community and analytics community and AI world, there's very much this idea called data mesh that is quite popular now, gaining popularity. And in the central idea of a data mesh is that data is a product and it is owned by a team. So there is no central governance anymore. That's all gone away. The owning team creates contracts that, with respect to data freshness, data availability, data definitions, data quality, in fact, and they can set standards for data quality. And that's actually becoming more popular. There are a lot of reasons why moving to the cloud actually enables the movement towards data mesh. The data mesh idea has its roots in design-driven domain ideas from about 10 years ago. I'm not sure on this date, but roughly 10 years ago, or probably more at this point, DDD, or design-driven domain, became a good topic, and that was the progenitor of both the microservices movement for refactoring applications when you move to the cloud. We talked about this briefly last week. You may do a lift and shift and get your application to the cloud and then refactor into microservices. Microservices is closely related to the data mesh concept. So I won't say more about that now, but again, it's usually a good idea to have this architecture role identified and visible in your team. And if you let me know what you want to learn about this, because I could go on at length, and I'm going to stop here for today. But I'm definitely happy to explain more about this, and I think that's the value of having people like me and Jessica and Glenn Yu that was on a few weeks back. We're practitioners with long experience, and this is the advantage of having us walk through this material rather than just going into Skills Boost and doing everything by yourself. All right, so with that said, we've come up to the Q&A period. Ask us anything. I don't know if there are too many questions today, but if anybody's having, first off, is anybody having issues with Skills Boost or difficulty? I'm not seeing any complaints about it on Slack. So I think everyone's at least connected on Skills Boost and moving forward in some fashion. So if there are any questions about Skills Boost, let's raise them now. You could either put something in the chat or just open your mic and speak out. Okay, I'm seeing a few comments here. Good. It's all good. We definitely have a smaller group this evening. We had 50. We had over 50 last week, which was kind of surprising to me. We have 21 this evening, so I'm thinking maybe that's a vacation week for some people, and possibly other reasons. Maybe I just went on too long last week, and people decided they wanted to drop off. The small group was because of the email. I don't understand what that means. Could you open your mic and tell us what that means? Which email was that?
We got an email that says that our session was canceled and no further explanation.
Oh, that must be a mix-up with the other group.
That was data engineer. It's not the database.
Yeah.
It's a different path.
I am not sure because I was only attending this path.
Yeah.
I am very sure that I got email for this path because this is the only path I was doing.
Right.
Beside the AI. So there was something with the email. You should.
So
who sent the email? Do you know?
I can send it to you. I can get it and send
Oh
it
yeah,
back to you.
please forward it to me,
Because
or send me
So
or contact me on Slack
yeah,
and we can follow
I
up.
was not going to today because I got that email. I was not going to attend,
you know what?
but
Maybe that's why.
I said there is something funny because you know I just felt like the email was no right, and I said okay, let me check out, and I log in
Yeah.
and the group in the mail. Yeah, I think that there was something wrong with it. I think that they messed up. Somebody messed up send it to your group. It's
Oh,
Well,
that's too bad. But there, I mean, to be fair, there were a fewer registrations today as well. And usually, if you do want to continue with this learning path, all of the sessions through the end of August are all open. You can jump on and sign up for all of them right now.
yes, I think
Yeah.
that I'm going to sign off for all the session because I want to get as much certification I can. I already
Yeah,
have.
there's no downside to signing up for, in other words, we're not having a physical meeting. Like if you're in a physical meeting, an in-person meeting, I would say please sign up only if you really are planning to attend, right? Because otherwise you cause a lot of chaos in terms of, the room size and getting food and all that. It causes a lot of problem. But with a virtual meeting,
Mm.
there's no downside. You can just sign up for all of them. I'll follow up with you afterwards and see if we can sort out the
I am very
confusion
sure
about the
that
email. Hmm.
I'm very sure that there was an issue with the email because I read it,
Okay.
and I think that right now somebody in the chat also had the same problem. I think
Hmm.
um,
Interesting.
they canceled your session, but they didn't say that anything. So I thought that the session was canceled, but that is strange because we were doing good last week, and
Exactly.
that's why I went to my
Yeah. So
email.
if you do see any more emails, just make sure that it's referring to right exactly as Kasaba just put in the chat. The data engineer and the database engineer are completely separate, and there was a plan to run the data engineer series starting in July. That series has now been canceled, but that has nothing to do with our path is ongoing. We're on a different path, and we're going to keep going until the end. So, yeah, hopefully, well, that's why we're recording everything. So, hopefully, anybody can still catch up, and hopefully, not a big problem. Are there any other questions about Skills Boost before we go on? Okay. What about the MySQL course and the Postgres course? Are there any concerns there? I haven't done these labs myself since a year ago. I did the whole series last year, and a few that have changed. I'm going to repeat them, but we haven't come to the ones yet that have changed. So the ones that have changed are related to Big Table, and that's in a couple weeks still away from us. So please feel free to ask any questions now about that so far. There was a lab that missed an instruction, meaning the lab was missing an instruction or you missed an instruction.
Manuscript. The lab means manuscript.
I hate to say it, and I apply this to myself as well. The most common problem if you have a trouble with a lab is that you skipped a step, because it's very easy. The way it's written, it's like 30, 40 steps sometimes, and it's very easy just to skip something. So I completely get it. And that's why you can do it again. The best thing is, if you think you can figure out what you did wrong, you can try to back up and fix it. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So I would, spend 5-10 minutes maybe trying to repair the step that was skipped. But if you really get stuck, and especially if the time is getting close to the end, just cancel it. Just cancel out that lab and start over. I mean, it's not a big deal to rerun the labs.